Jay. Like I say, my name's Kevin Wiltse. Um, Josh, you know Alan Mandeman is a good friend of mine. I spoke at No-Till on the Plains like 20 years ago several times, and Alan always started his presentation by, "I'm a farmer, not a public speaker." So that goes for me the same. Um, so I'm not gonna go into a lot of details of the little details of how we do things. So please, if you have a question, ask it along the way. I'm pretty easy going on this deal. So that's my wife Mandy and I. We farm primarily in Rush County, Kansas, which would be, if you're familiar with Kansas, it'd be south of Hayes, about 45 miles and just a little bit east. 22 to 24 inch average annual precipitation. Our normal precipitation is somewhere between 14 inches and 28 inches. Primarily Harney silt loams, which is the state soil of Kansas, pretty predominant. It's pretty decent soil. Main cash crops, we grow a lot of alfalfa for a cash crop, wheat, milo, soybeans, and we've done sunflowers, corn, and all sorts of stuff. That's pretty much it there. And we do have a cow-calf operation. We retain the stockers, and I do have a small and growing grass-finished beef business. So I want to start out by recommending a book to all of you if you haven't read it, called The Reed Warbler by Charles Massey. It's probably one of my favorite books that I've read. It's one of the only books I've actually read twice. But Massey talks about these two different mindsets. One of a mechanical mind. Man is separate from and so can dominate and is master over nature, versus a different mindset that looks to natural ecosystems and nature's wisdom. And he calls that more of an organic mind, or one based on observation. And I think if you're going to be successful in a regenerative type system, you need to try to get to this more organic mind. And that's hard to do because my whole life I've been a mechanical mind person. I think the majority of people are, especially in the developed worlds, okay? So yeah, hard to do, but that's where we need to be. The older I get, the easier it is for me to be more of a mind that observes a lot more of my surroundings. So, and then also in Massey's book, you'll see like holistic management will show you the 4 ecosystem functions, and Massey does a really good job. He adds one that's human social interaction, and how those all kind of tie together in this dynamic whole. So again, I think it's important for you to think about the context that you're in, your environment, and think about all these systems on your farm or ranch, whatever you got, or life in general, and see where within each of those you maybe have weak links that you need to address. And those weak links are going to change the function of a different cycle, because everything's tied together. And this human social interaction is a big one that he adds, because we all have things maybe with family or landlords, or that maybe sways your management decisions, or maybe it's government policy that props up a commodity-based system. I mean, all those things have a pull on all of these different functions. So a little bit about our farm history. I started 100% no-till in 1997. We went up to, I think it was the first No-Till on the Plains conference, and we went on a bus tour to Dakota Lakes up there and saw what Dwayne Beck was doing. We come home, sold the tillage equipment, ordered a no-till drill, and away we went. And we thought, boy, over time it's just going to get better and better and better. And well, over time it really didn't. So no-till by itself just wasn't getting us where we were wanting to go. So we have very poor infiltration rates, and still do. And I think that goes back to those landscape or those ecosystem functions. Our water cycle is broke, so we're trying to, how do we fix this? We need to fix our solar energy cycle and have something growing all the time, and fix this mess we're in. We still have, like I say, tons of runoff in our kind of conventional no-till systems, and then a ton of wind erosion events, and you have those out here as well, where you seed a crop and the wind comes up and it's gone. And I mean, this sets us back years and years and years when an event like that happens. So that got me just, thinking we're always supposed to be mimicking Mother Nature. And it's like, well, Mother Nature doesn't use annuals unless we screw up the perennial system. So that's why about 2014, I'm like, we need to start getting perennials in our systems. And we were using cover crops as well, starting in about 06, off and on. But I think for rapid soil improvement, we have to get, on our soils, we got to get perennials in our system. Yeah, that's how our soils were built, diverse perennial ecosystems and grazing animals. So that's how they were built. So that's kind of been my journey from 2014 on. This won't mean really anything to any of you unless you've been to Ranching for Profit school. So I've been through the holistic management course as well. And part of that deal is, okay, you're supposed to come up with this holistic goal. And we sat down, my wife and I, and we tried to write this holistic goal, and it's just hard to do. Just sit down and write a goal for your operation and your life. So Ranching for Profit, they give you so many tools to help you do this sort of thing. So Mandy and I were fortunate enough to kind of be selected to go up in the front of the class, and she sat down with Dave Pratt, and I was with Alan Crockett, and we just wrote all this stuff down. What do we want, our operation and farm and ranch and life basically in general to look like? And of course, Mandy has ideas and I have ideas, and then this process is called, I think, ICA's acronym for something. But anyway, then they kind of put, some of these are Mandy's, some of these are mine, and then they put them under these certain headings. So this really helped. In about 20 minutes, we had this goal. In 5 years, we want a business that provides profit and financial freedom, allows for quality family time, provides an environment where our children may return if they desire, consists of simple, low-input enterprises, creates a healthy, diverse ecosystem, and provides an enjoyable work atmosphere with passionate employees. It's pretty simple, and it took us like 20 minutes to do this, and yeah, a lot of you probably would work for a lot of you as well. But so a couple things on this. I got this on my phone, so there's times in life and in decision-making, times arise on our farm where I really struggle trying to make a decision. So I'll pull out this goal on my phone and read it, and it's like, okay, whatever this problem is or whatever this decision I'm trying to make, does this, I read this goal, does this thing, it's yes or no. Does it help me get to this goal, make the decision, and move on? And that's really been helpful for me. And then the other thing is the goal really doesn't do anything if you don't make steps to get there. So you got to make an effort to, okay, this is my goal, and what are my steps to get to this goal? Because this is important to us. We really want this simple, low input enterprises, more family time, profitable type business, like probably most people do. So we came home from Ranching for Profit, and that was 4 years ago, about probably today when we finished the course. And we said, we're going to make changes, sweeping changes to our farm. So we came back. I gave up 8 quarters of farm ground. Some of it was irrigated. And then we decided we're going to focus basically on this land base that either Mandy I own, or my mom at this time owns. My dad was still alive at the time. But so we rent section here and other ground around, and own other ground around that we still do kind of more conventional cropping systems on, where we no-till with cover crops, or we'll run alfalfa on and stuff. So that's still, a part of our business that's kind of maybe going down over time, the custom farming business that we're kind of doing less of as well. But our big focus when we came back from Ranching for Profit is, I want to make this land base work for me. How are we going to do that? So yeah, these are the only pastures, this green, that we really have. It's just ground that couldn't be farmed. We're not in big ranch country, but we knew we wanted livestock to be a big part of this sustainable, simple, low input enterprise that we want. So from then on, we've seeded about 550 acres into perennials. This little, 65 acres here and then this little patch here are both in different cool season mixes or cool season stuff that we talk about. And everything else that we've done has been more, I say native, there is some non-native species in there, but more diverse, warm, cool season grasses and broadleaves and legumes type mixes. So that's what we did there. Then since then, we put in like over 30,000 feet of water line and put in several tire tanks and a lot of just watering points with those just risers with those Plosson valves in there that we can plug in all along these water lines. So we can now water all the cropland in there and all the grass. We do have plans for more water lines yet, but then this last winter we seeded some pollinator strips, buffers kind of around the farm, and those are going to kind of double as lanes for moving cattle easily for us. So those will be high tensile fence kind of permanent lanes. We've put up miles and miles and miles of high tensile fence around this whole deal to make it easy. Okay, it goes back to my goal. It's got to be simple. We've tried to do a lot of this without all that stuff in place, hauling water and moving cows, and you just don't do it. I mean, you do it a year and then you kind of don't. So it's got to be simple. So yeah, that's where we're at. And again, I'm not going to go through a lot of details on this. The annual cropping, cover crop deal, I'll just kind of tell you my experiences. And in this area, or this land base kind of we're talking about, our number one focus is probably raising, on all of our cropland, is raising forage for the animals. But it is nice to have some of that cropland still to take advantage of market situations. Like, this past year, grain prices were high. You could lock in good prices. Fertilizer was cheap last fall. There's good market opportunities to make significant income off grain crops. So we still have that flexibility. Most of the cropping in this land base, we'll either do milo, because then we can always graze the residue, or we'll do a lot of triticale. Leaves us a lot of options. Once in a while, wheat. Yeah. Cover crops, just kind of a brief history of my work with cover crops. We used to always grow cover crops. Like, the easy place to put them is after wheat harvest before spring crop, when you're in like a wheat sorghum, type of rotation. And just virtually about every time we did that, we had a decreased yield of our following cash crop. A lot of that's weather, dry weather related. Some of it's not, and I'm sure if you do that out here, you're going to probably experience the same thing. I'm not going to say don't do it, but yeah, we've kind of learned to manage that a little more. Depends a lot on species of cover crops, how long you let them grow. But if you want to know a lot about cover crops, go talk to the guys at Green Cover Seed. They're kind of the experts on that. So our primary focus on cover crops, if we can't, virtually every cover crop we grow, we're going to graze. So I want to get some revenue off of it. We do grow some cover crops on some of our rented ground that's out of way, and it's predominantly just for weed control because we can't control weeds anymore with chemicals. So we do real cheap cover crops on there just to help with weed control. But how do we use cover crops in this land base? We'd like to have at least one acre per cow of a full season cover crop, and that's what this is. And this particular one, we were pulling 120 animal days grazing off of this. On a dry year, we maybe be down to 60 animal days off of this. But this always gives us, it's good for soil health, but gives us forage. Like now, actually Monday, we just pulled off of some range and we went on to these full season cover crops. And these are always managed with daily moves. There's just a ton of reasons why you want to do that. So there's about 20 minutes later, and then just some of the residual we're leaving behind on those. Something we started doing a few years ago is if we pull onto these full season covers now, if we know we're going to be done with that field by say the middle October or something, we'll seed a cereal like triticale or something after we graze. If we know we're not going to get on it until like after that time frame, it's going to be a winter stockpile deal. We'll seed our triticale, or we've done wheat before even, just right through our green cover crop like that, full season cover crop. We'll just seed it right through there, and then it'll be there the next spring, through the winter and the spring. Takes some fertility to get that done because you're seeding that cereal into such a high carbon cover crop, and obviously takes some rain, but this is kind of an example of that. And you can faintly, this was in the fall, you can faintly see the wheat coming up through there. And then this is kind of more in the spring, or triticale, whatever that was. But that makes a really good stockpile forage like February and March. That green, helps balance the rumen with all that dry that they're getting. It just makes a really nice stockpile forage for us. And then we do a lot also of, when one cover crop's done, we're seeding another cover crop or forage crop, whatever you want to call them. So a lot of our more cool season things always have triticale as a base. We'll plant a diverse mix, like now my employee, that's what he's doing as we speak. He's seeding a mix, and it'll have triticale as a base. That way we can graze it this fall, and then we can graze it in the spring. I like triticale instead of wheat, kind of in this region, just because we have so much more flexibility. We don't have to worry about insurance, on our wheat. So if you want to graze it out or hay it or spray it or, harvest it for seed, whatever you want to do, just a lot of flexibility. In the springtime, we start calving about the 1st of April, and usually that's about the time we can start strip grazing this stuff. So we've been, for 4 or 5 years now, we've been doing that. We've been calving out on this stuff where we're just giving them a little bit each day, but we're still leaving dry, good quality dry feed we're putting out in the strips with them to help balance the rumen, because that's just so much protein, way more than they need for cow-calf pair. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing with that in the spring. In the fall, a lot of times our stockers are running on this type of stuff, and we're kind of lazy in the fall. The stockers, a lot of times we'll just set stock those fields. We really need to probably be managing the grazing too, but yeah, that's just another picture. Again, a lot of times we'll graze this triticale off, and then we'll let it grow back, and then we'll harvest it and have the seed clean and sell it to your neighbors. And so it's kind of a good deal there. So then that leads me into the perennial sequences, is which I'm really my focus is. And we have basically 2 modes of thought with this, and one is a short-term break, and one is kind of a more, I say permanent. It's more permanent because it's going to take a lot longer payout, because your seed expense is probably twice as high as this, and it takes a lot longer to get established. So.
Yeah, and I'm sorry for interrupting you. On that beardless triticale, when you're doing your moves, how many more days of grazing do you get out of that by moving him every single day as opposed to getting in the whole field?
So the question was, how many more grazing days can we get moving them every day versus set stocking? And I'm going to say, when we're like this spring, when we were moving every day on that triticale with our pairs, we were pulling 60 animal days off of that. But we also had some dry feed out there too, so that definitely should reduce that a little bit. But yeah, when you set stock something like that, I'm going to say you're maybe, especially at that point in time, maybe 15, animal days, maybe 30 possibly, depending on how many you got out there. And so yeah, you're going to double your efficiency for sure. And then you get the manure distribution. That's one of my main deals I like out there. So.
And a lot of that's because of the regrowth, because you can hit it hard, come back.
As far as the manure distribution.
Well, that in days, extended days.
Oh yeah, grazing days. We can go across it, then we move to the next corridor, go across it, and the next one, and then all of a sudden this is ready to regraze. We can come back across it, regraze it, or we can let it go. We'll let it go sometimes just for cover, or let it go and harvest it for grain. Again, it's just a lot of options. Most of the time we don't get across our triticale in the spring before it starts getting too mature, and then our other pastures we need to get on our perennials. So So a lot of times we have some left that we end up harvesting for seed. Good questions. So yeah, here's where we're at with our perennial stuff. So we're coming straight off our triticale. We're going on to these CoolSeason mixes that we're trying to grow. So my one pasture I got with CoolSeason, we seeded about 3 years ago, and we had like 4 different types of CoolSeason grass in it, and had a couple pounds of alfalfa and like half pound of chicory. Not as diverse as what I would like to see. So I should have talked to Dale Strickler at Green Cover Seed before I bought my stuff. So, but the alfalfa, everything came up great, and then we got an early frost and it killed the alfalfa in there. So I tried to go in the next spring and I interseeded 6 more pounds of alfalfa. It rained, it came up nice, but then that grass was just so competitive that it ended up choking out a lot of the alfalfa. So I don't have near as much diversity as I want. First year we grazed it, again, daily move, strip grazer. We waited until it was fairly mature, so we didn't hurt the grass. And we got 60 cow days off of it, so it'd be more animal days than that. And then the next year, I thought, boy, this is a great deal. And on this deal, we have water down the middle with the portable tank, so we're moving the water and we're using a back fence and just kind of moving them around in a circle. So we thought, this is going to be great the next year, and it was a disaster because the grass was so nitrogen deficient. These CoolSeason grasses are so nitrogen hungry. And we only got 15 animal days off the first pass the second year, and I was like, oh, that's a train wreck. This definitely doesn't pay compared to cropping kind of a deal. So we will go through in the winter and get some more grazing days off of this. So then about a year ago, we spread a bunch of composted manure on there. I was trying to really get away from any commercial fertilizer on this, and that did help a lot, but you can still tell it's a little nitrogen deficient on there. So anyway, this type of sequence, I think, on my crop ground is we're looking at finding this and finding what we really like and maybe using it for 5 or 6 years and then going back to annual cropping on some of this land. Again, this is all going back to my goal. I want rapid soil health improvement that we haven't been able to get through all these years. Simple, low input enterprises. This spring or May, it was incredibly wet, and he just pugged the heck out of some of this. So we went in and I seeded sorghum Sudan into that CoolSeason mix, kind of pasture cropped that in there. And I ran 135 pounds of ESM, polymer coated urea, so 60 pounds of nitrogen with this. Just to kind of watch it and see what would happen. And here it is a little later, then it got really dry, and most of that sorghum Sudan was basically burned up and dead, except in the spots where they really pugged it out hard or around the mineral feeder or tanks, and then it's like doing really well. Since it's rained and some of it's actually, a lot of it's actually greened back up. So we'll see what this does. I did the side that was kind of pugged really hard. You can see it over here. And then on my last pass, I ran out of seed, so I just was going out this way. So I blew down 60 pounds of nitrogen on this just for fun. And then right here's the line. You can see the response to the nitrogen fertilizer that we got. So going forward, I'm not sure, since this field doesn't have the legume component that I really want. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think we'll probably have to start using a little nitrogen fertilizer to get the productivity out of this that we need to make it work. So.
You do dry or liquid?
That was dry on that. So we use a lot of ESN, that polymer coated urea, because I hate putting on the big flush of whatever you're doing, a big flush of nitrogen all at one time. I like that slow release. And we run that down a lot with our air seeder on cover crops and cash crops as well. I think that slow release is a lot easier on the soil microbes, and better for the plants as well. So, and it's pretty safe to run down with the seed. What we found, we can run pretty high rates down with seed. So then my other CoolSeason venture we're kind of playing with, and this field is part of the Farms Project. So if you're not familiar with the Farms Project, kudos to Lauren and Becky and Joni for setting all that up. It's a really neat model that they're doing. They've just done a really good job. So Kernza, if you're not familiar, it's a grain of an intermediate wheatgrass that's being developed at the Land Institute in Salina. So it's basically a perennial grain. That's what they're trying to develop there. It's in the very, very beginning stages of commercialization. So this year, well, there's a Sustainagrain is the company in Kansas that's kind of heading the commercialization of it. And there's probably maybe half a dozen producers in the state that have Kernza this past season. So I have exactly 1 year of experience with it. But I'm kind of excited about it. Well, I'm really excited about it in a way. I'm not excited about it because it's a monoculture, but we're kind of going to do some stuff to hopefully fix that. But I'm excited about it because the grazing potential is enormous, and there's the possibility to take grain off. At this point, it's a really high value grain. So yeah, just a lot of different flexibility and things you can do with it.
This is all dry land?
This is all dry land. We're 100% dry land. This would work really good under irrigation, like up here in the high plains, this type of system, like CoolSeason and pastures, and yeah, I think it'd be.
And that's an annual?
This is a perennial. So you plant it once and you're done.
It's CoolSeason?
CoolSeason Grass. It's an intermediate wheatgrass. So Western wheatgrass is really similar to it. This was in March. The biology, everybody talks about all the soil hanging on the roots. That's biology doing that. This is kind of neat. Part of the farms project, the field was heavily sampled before we kind of started, and it'll be sampled again when we're done. So we'll get to kind of maybe look at some of the changes that were made. But you can already see what this Kernza is doing to the structure up at the top. And then, I don't know if I can make this work or not. Maybe? Yeah. So this was in March. The stuff was planted at the end of August, about a year ago now, and we've got roots down to like 17, 18 inches, like big roots. So I'm excited about that. I think that's gonna do good things for our soil. This was just a little later. Again, NitrogenHungry Crop. We probably got 80 to 100 pounds of N on this first year out of the gate. We mixed the Kernza seed with dry fertilizer to get it to flow through our air seeder when we seeded it. This is what it looks like getting close to harvest. Looks like say a Western wheatgrass kind of. This is our sample that we sent to Sustainagrain out of the combine. I don't own a combine, so I had called my neighbor, and he brought his old 9500 over with the stripper head. This is the first time Kernza ever has been stripped. And it's kind of funny. He made a pass along this edge, and he stopped. And he was getting out adjusting his combine, and I buzzed over there on the four-wheeler, and I said, well, how's it look in the grain tank? And he kind of looked at me and laughed. He said, there's nothing in the grain tank. So we had to make a few more adjustments, and then it was good to go. So it was pretty uneventful, because I've heard a lot of horror stories from the guys at Sustainagrain. They've been trying to straight cut it, and some of them will windrow it and then use pickup heads. And so it's pretty hard to separate that. With a stripper header, well, you saw the sample, it worked really good. So we got about 550 pounds an acre off of this, which is really good. So the perennial, the perennial like this, as far as grain production, your maximum grain production is going to be year one, and then it's going to go downhill. Because perennials over time, the first year they want to reproduce by seed, but then they want to reproduce by vegetation, like what species it is, whether it's rhizomes or tillers or whatever. So part of the challenge with Kernza, and like to say there's half a dozen producers or so trying to figure this out, how we're going to get this out into commercial. So kind of once harvest is over, you got to get sunlight back down to those crowns. So on my deal, they said swath and bale it. So we swathed it. We left a lot of stubble standing. There's a lot of ground cover still, and we took this off, and 3.2 tons an acre of basically grinding hay. It's not really good quality, but we'll sell it for grinding hay. And then we went in and seeded a 11 species mix, annual mix into this to try to add diversity, trying to pasture crop something into it. That's kind of the deal I'm looking at. Some of the producers, they're talking about maybe strip tilling this kind of on an angle to tear up that Kernza, because it wants to become sod bound, and then it's going to decrease seed production. So some of them are looking at that. One there's an organic field where they have a row of Kernza, 2 rows of alfalfa, and a row of Kernza. There's producer doing some interseeding with different perennials. So again, just beginning stages of commercialization. This is where my vision of Kernza on our farm is what I want to see. Again, we're going for maximum grain production here because right now that's where the money's at. So, but in my eyes, I would like to see maybe Kernza spread out on like 40-inch rows, and then in between alfalfa, legumes, and probably some warm season grass as well. Because when I'm done with Kernza harvest, I don't want to swath and bale. I want to turn the cows out and have something there to graze. You know, they're not going to eat this stuff. It's like this after harvest. So that's kind of the vision. The next field for me for Kernza is that's kind of the vision I want to see. And I think the wider rows, because the field they have now it's 7.5-inch rows, row of Kernza, like I say, 2 rows of alfalfa. And they're having trouble with the alfalfa growing up tall and interfering with harvest. I think with the wider Kernza rows, that alfalfa would get enough sunlight that it would probably stay a little lower down in the canopy. So
you'll only get so many years of harvesting that, and then it'll just be a grazing pasture.
yeah, it could be. Yeah, I think they think that the seed production is probably, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but they think the seed production probably was by year 5 or so. It's probably going to be, you know, done unless we can find a way to manage it to keep it growing, you know, more grain. So yeah, it could remain as just a pasture, or we could, you know, like this field here, I think we'll probably rotate that out maybe in 5 years and probably seed it to alfalfa or something. Hopefully we get rapid soil health, rapid changes in our soil health. Probably the thing I'm most interested in, I don't know where I'm at on time, but most interested in are these things that I've been seeding. And you don't pay any attention to what's in there, but there's a bunch of different species in there, and these are my more diverse perennial seedings. And that's kind of where the last couple are. We're kind of settling on that sort of a mix. In year 1, like I say, these mixes take a lot longer to get established. So year 1, we have on this particular field, it went in behind Milo, and so we had a lot of volunteer Milo out there, and so we got over 30 cow days off of this, so probably 40, 45-ish animal days, and we wanted the animal impact out there, so we did this on daily moves, and I just like this little video here I took, because every time we do this daily move stuff, and you talk about ecosystem health, these birds just, whenever we're doing this, wherever we're at, we have these birds that just follow the cattle. And I mean, those are just signs. The birds are a huge sign of ecosystem health, you know, numbers and species diversity. So yeah, year 1, pretty good grazing, weeds and volunteer cover crop stuff left over. Year 2, this isn't year 2. Year 2, there's really not much there at all because your weeds kind of go away after year 1. And then your grasses and everything's just kind of starting. So year 2, we're down in that 15 animal days grazing off of it is all. So it's pretty low. Year 3, this is year 3 on a field we did, and I love this. This is, man, when we went out and moved those cattle every day, it's just like the smells from the alfalfa and the clover, and this is awesome. I just love this stuff, the diversity and the changes we're seeing. Yeah, you can see all the diversity out there. So, and what I like most about this system, this is just going to keep getting better every year, better and better if we manage the grazing. And that's our only input is the grazing. You know, we're not going to do anything else to this. We've got our infrastructure in place now. We're just implementing managed grazing. So this soil, the forage, should just keep getting better and better every year. And that's the kind of system I really want.
How many bad eyes do you get in the cattle?
I've had this conversation a lot. Pink eye with cattle. And last year we struggled a lot with it. And here's my philosophy on pink eye with cattle. And we see this when we rotate around is we have, you know, you might go in a pasture or your paddock just for the first time now and you got all this tall rank grass. And that's what leads to most pink eye problems is your irritation on your eyes. I have found, and cover crops will do the same thing. Don't ever turn a bunch of cattle out in a tall sorghum sedan, 100 acres or whatever, and just let them go with pairs because they won't have any eyes left walking through this stuff. If you manage that grazing and you move every day, what I have found is we'll have less eye pressure, eye problems, whatever you want to say, eye problem pressure, because they go in there and well, you saw that one picture in about 20 minutes, how that paddock is trampled. So that is lower and the calves aren't walking through it as much. And so I think, well, I know for sure we have less eye problems where we do on daily moves. And I think it all has to do with getting that forage trampled down so those calves aren't walking through it. So.
And part of that's because when they have a bigger paddock, they walk to what they want to eat and then they're passing.
Yep, or they're coming back to water, and those little calves are walking through that stuff. And cows, it'll irritate their eyes when they eat as well. But the calves, it gets really bad on them. If they're walking through that, coming back through the water, and it's tearing up their eyes, we've seen some train wrecks. This is what we were leaving behind, and then since then that's regrown and recovered, and yeah, this is.
So how soon could you come back on that same pattern, would you say?
So this is year 3 on this. We could graze this winter again, stockpile graze it easy if we need to. Yeah, we got way more grass this year than we got cattle just because of this type of grazing management. We've just got all this grass in front of us. Now we're going to cover crops. So
what sort of recovery period do you figure on that?
So during growing season recovery period, kind of what I've found in our area, like in fast growth stages early on, 30 days maybe, but slow growth, I think we're probably pushing out to 75, 80 days probably, recovery periods during the slow growth phase. But most of the time, we're not coming back on stuff. We're going through it one time in the growing season. We will come back on in the winter and stockpile graze some, but we just haven't got our it's hard when you're it's hard to get your cattle. You need to be flexible with your cattle numbers, the flexible, because some years we have way more forage than we have cattle, and then the next year maybe it's dry and you don't have that much forage. So it's hard, it is hard to balance that. But I would rather have way more forage left over than the other way, because that's not fun. So yeah, and some of the stuff we're seeing, finally, we stopped using pour-on wormers 6 years ago now, and we're finally, the last couple of years, starting to see dung beetle activities. They're just the little black ones that do all this tunneling. We don't have those big, we have a few of those big rollers, but some guys have those big rollers that just destroy the manure paths. We don't have those yet. But again, kind of like the birds, the insects are just key indicators that your ecosystem is finally starting to turn the right direction. That's, I just love this stuff. So, and some of the changes we're seeing, this is 25 years of no-till at least with using cover crops. And our soils, we get this platiness in there. If we have any fallow period at all for a month or two where our biology in the soil collapses, I don't know why, a lot of clay in our soils, we get this platiness, and poor infiltration rates. But again, this is that CoolSeason mix. This is 2.5 years after seeding is what that looks like with grazing. And this is one of probably a 4-year of our more diverse perennial mix. I don't need a soil test to tell me, what's better. Yeah, organic matter on these soils is about 2.5, and these, honestly, we're up to 3 to 3.5 in just a few years. But more than that, for me, is the porosity in the soil and the structure. And with the perennial system, that's just going to keep getting pushed deeper and deeper. And that's where we're going to gain water infiltration and hopefully get our water cycle headed in the right direction. Because I bet half our water runs off. If we could capture that, just think of all the forage we could grow. So this is what really excites me, and kind of what, I love to do this. So Economics, this is always a tough one because I could put numbers up here to make it look as good or bad as I probably wanted to. Again, we're doing this, we kind of just threw all the cards in on this deal, on this land base. This is what we want. And we might be giving up some profit on some years. You know, I'm willing to do that on my own land because I really believe, I just have faith, you know, we're just jumping off this cliff that we're gonna be better off in the end, okay? Things you can do, like I say, we take advantage of the markets if they exist. We'll harvest maybe some oat seed or triticale seed and have it cleaned. If it's VNS, don't do it if it's protected. Sell it to your neighbors. You know, if you can make an extra $10,000 a year or whatever doing that, you know, it helps. We started doing grass-finished beef. This year we did 20. You know, is that a lot? Well, every year it's kind of going up. Next year we got spots for 25. So again, every little bit helps. That's less of the other stuff I have to do. So that's kind of my philosophy. So we're still doing a lot of the other, well, not a lot, less and less kind of custom farming, conventional farming around. But we're hoping we don't have to do that. We get all the kids through college and all that good stuff. So yeah, I think it's important. I think most successful regenerative producers find a way to add value to their products somehow. You know, it's just that's what I see. And you know, you're competing against a commodity system that's, I mean, propped up with government support. And I was talking to Josh yesterday, okay, on these fields that I did all these perennials on, I didn't get any of this government handout that we did last year with the coronavirus and the MFP and all this stuff. We didn't get that on those other fields. You know, we did. I don't know how many. We got a lot of money on those fields. And it's like, you're competing against this type of deal. So, and here we are, we're trying to do the right thing. We're trying to build a business. Yeah. So anyway, do whatever you got to do to stay in business. That's number one. Okay. If you got to make a tillage pass out here to stay in business, do what you got to do and don't worry about what anybody else is telling you. So, patience, look where we were in the past to where we are today. This stuff is slow. Especially, I mean, it's going faster with perennials, but all this soil health stuff we've been doing all this years, it's, you know, what they do in North Dakota is going to take longer to do here just because of your context, where you're at. And what you guys are lucky because what you do here is going to be a lot better than what they have in the Texas Panhandle. Okay. So, but just make sure you're moving forward. Okay. Nature is not very complicated. She's not complicated, but very complex and slow. Again, I'm not big on a bunch of inputs, trying to whatever, you know, whether it's variable rate, this and that. My belief on my farm is I'm going to put diversity out there and I'm going to let Mother Nature take care of what she wants to take care of. That's my belief. I just don't want to do all that other stuff. We will manage for what we want, not against what we don't want. This is a ranching for profit quote, saying, whatever you'll hear if you go to school there. And what I've found is there's unintended consequences for all of our actions that we do. Positive and negative, a lot of them negative. But I've found if we do this more, if this is our mindset, most of those unintended consequences then become positive. But if we're out here doing this all the time, managing against what we don't want, then you start to see all these unintended consequences. You may not see them, but they're negative. You know, if we're trying to kill things all the time just so we can grow something, yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff that's going on. And finally, this is my favorite one, another ranching for profit. You have the perfect system in place to get the same results you are currently getting. If you're happy where you're at, then don't change, okay? But if you're not happy where you're at, there's a pretty good chance if you don't change, next year you're going to get the same results. So keep moving forward, keep making changes towards that goal. Yeah, this is a good one. Just a few resources I want to just throw at you. I listened to several podcasts, John Kemp's podcast. This is my favorite podcast, Working Cows podcast. I've listened to that since the beginning. Clay Connery's the host, does a really good job. He's a good person. A lot of good guests on there. That book I mentioned before is really good. And anything ranching for profit. yeah. So if you want to change your life and your mindset and operation, go to ranching for profit. It's expensive, but you will come out of there changed. So